It happened at a rooftop party her company threw in Dallas. The kind with too many Edison bulbs and not enough seating. You know, the type where the marketing team tries to make it look like an Instagram moment, even though half the people there are counting the minutes until they can go home or sneak off with someone they shouldn't. I hadn't planned on going. Emily had mentioned it earlier in the week, almost offhandedly. There's this thing Friday night for work. You can come if you want. That was it. No excitement in her voice. No persuasive smile like she used to give when she actually wanted me somewhere. Just that half-shrug, half-obligation tone I'd come to recognize more and more over the years. But something about the way she said it, the vagueness, the way she didn't follow up after, it stuck with me. So I went. I didn't tell her I'd be there, just showed up. I figured I'd surprise her. I didn't expect the surprise to be mine. The building was downtown. One of those new mid-rises with ground-floor coffee shops and yoga studios, and enough brushed metal railings to make you feel like you're part of a better, cooler world. I remember the elevator ride up. Some guy in a blazer who smelled like expensive cologne, and a girl on her phone laughing at something that wasn't funny. My stomach was in knots the whole ride, and I couldn't tell you why. When the elevator doors opened, the music hit first. Bass-heavy, loud enough to shake the cheap plastic cups they handed out near the entrance. The air smelled like sunscreen and sangria. I weaved through clusters of coworkers talking about things they probably didn't care about, trying to spot her in the crowd. And then I saw her. She was near the makeshift bar, a folding table with an ice bucket and a woman pouring wine out of bottles with no labels. Emily stood right at the center of it all. Red dress, hair down, cheeks slightly flushed from the heat or the wine or maybe just the attention. She looked alive. I hadn't seen her look like that in a long time. And standing next to her, close enough to feel the static between them, was a man I didn't recognize. Tall, maybe mid-30s, confident in that effortless, practiced way. Button-down shirt rolled at the sleeves, hand resting casually on her lower back like it belonged there. He leaned in to whisper something. She laughed. Really laughed. The kind of laugh that comes from the chest. Head tilted back, eyes half closed, hand instinctively reaching for his arm as if to say stop, you're terrible, but also, don't stop. Her hand landed on his chest. His hand stayed on her waist. And she didn't move. She didn't even flinch. I was standing maybe 20 feet away. She hadn't seen me. Or maybe she had and decided not to. I stood there for a minute, then another. I wasn't sure what I was waiting for. Maybe a moment where she'd pull away, notice me, smile and wave me over. A gesture that would pull me back into her orbit, remind me that I still had a place beside her. But that moment never came. So I just watched her from behind a row of potted plants, like some stranger who didn't belong. And for the first time in our marriage, I felt like an outsider in my own life. Eventually, I left without saying a word. Drove home with the windows down even though it was too hot. Music off, just the sound of the wind and my thoughts rushing past each other. She came home a few hours later, heels in her hand, hair slightly tousled, that same glow still lingering on her skin. "Hey," she said, surprised to see me on the couch. "Didn't think you'd be up." "I was at the party," I said, keeping my voice neutral. She blinked. "Wait, you came?" I nodded. "Yeah, didn't want to get in the way. Just thought I'd swing by. You looked like you were having fun." That's when it happened. Her expression shifted, just slightly. Her eyes narrowed for half a second, and then the wall went up. "Why are you saying it like that?" "Like what?" "Like you're accusing me of something." "I'm not." "You are," she said, moving past me toward the kitchen. "I can hear it in your tone." "Jesus, Mark, can't I just have a night out without being interrogated?" "I didn't say anything," I replied, even though we both knew that wasn't true. She poured herself a glass of water, not looking at me. "Who was the guy?" I asked, quietly. She let out a bitter little laugh, not like the one I saw earlier. This one was sharp, dismissive. "God, seriously, you're doing this again?" "I just asked." "No, you accused," she snapped, turning to face me. "You always do this, Mark. Every time I talk to another man, It's like you build this whole narrative in your head. It's exhausting. I stared at her. You touched his chest. So what? She said, shrugging. We were laughing. It's called being friendly. Friendly? I repeated, letting the words sit between us. She walked out of the kitchen, brushing past me. This is exactly why I don't tell you when these things come up. You twist everything. I'm just asking for honesty. And I'm asking for trust, she fired back. But that always seems to be conditional with you. That one stung, because she wasn't wrong. There had been times in the past when I jumped to conclusions. Times when I let my insecurities run the show. I'm not proud of those moments. But this didn't feel like one of them. This felt different. And the part that hurt the most? She didn't try to reassure me. She didn't say, he's just a friend. Or you have nothing to worry about. She didn't reach for my hand or look me in the eye. She just made it about me. About how I was the problem. About how I always do this. She turned the narrative until I was the paranoid husband again. The insecure one. The guy who ruins a perfectly normal night with his overthinking. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't fight back. I didn't plead. I didn't try to win the argument. I just nodded and said, okay, because I wasn't trying to win anything anymore. I was trying to understand what I'd already lost. After that night, I started seeing things. Not hallucinations, not ghosts or flickers in the dark. Real things. Subtle things. Things that had always been there but never registered. Like hearing a familiar song for the 1000th time and suddenly noticing the words. Emily was changing. Or maybe she already had, and I was just catching up. The first thing I noticed was her phone. It used to be a fixture on our kitchen counter, charging overnight, unlocked half the time because she never cared enough to hide anything. Sometimes I'd even plug it in for her when she forgot. But now it was always in her hand or face down on the table. Locked, silent, never buzzing out loud anymore. Just the faint glow of notifications lighting up the corner of the screen like Morse code. And whenever I got too close, she'd tilt it away, like a reflex. Not defensive, just practiced. I didn't say anything at first, just filed it away in my mind. Then it was her schedule. She used to be predictable. She liked routines. Morning coffee by 7:15, oatmeal or fruit. NPR while she got dressed. Out the door by 8. Back by 6 usually. Maybe a yoga class on Wednesdays. But suddenly her calendar filled up with team dinners. First once a month. Then twice. Then once a week. Then twice a week. I wanted to believe it. I really did. She worked in consulting. They wined and dined clients all the time. But the hours crept later and later. She'd leave in jeans and a blouse and come back in something she hadn't left the house wearing. Once it was a skirt I'd never seen before. Once, heels she claimed were just in her trunk from last year. But I remembered those shoes. I remembered her saying she hated them, called them foot traps. When I asked about the dinners, she'd shrug. The usual, she'd say. You know how it is. Except I didn't. Not anymore. One night she came home smelling different. I don't mean perfume. I mean someone else's cologne. Not mine. Something woodsy, sharp, not unpleasant but definitely not familiar. It clung to her jacket like a secret. She walked right past me, humming softly, kissed my cheek, and asked if I had eaten. I said yes, even though I hadn't. I just watched her float around the kitchen, opening the fridge, pouring a glass of wine, scrolling through her phone like nothing was off. But everything was. She had started running in the mornings, suddenly and religiously. Not our neighborhood jogs like we used to do together. These were solo sprints before dawn, before I even woke up. She said it helped her clear her head. I just need space in the mornings, she explained. I didn't question it. I wanted her to be happy, to be healthy. But it wasn't about health. It was about escape. She also started buying new clothes, subtle stuff, things she could say were on sale or for work. Blouses that fit just a little tighter, jeans with artful rips she once mocked. Oat milk, of all things, began appearing in our fridge. Emily used to roll her eyes at the idea. If I'm drinking milk, she used to say, I want it from something that has eyes. But now, she was blending it into smoothies with kale and protein powder and chia seeds. She told me she was reclaiming herself, reinventing. You should try it too, she said once, nudging me with her shoulder. We're not getting any younger. I laughed then, said I was fine as I was. She didn't laugh back. She just smiled, distantly. That was when the conversations started shrinking. We used to talk about everything. Dumb stuff, deep stuff, movies, work, philosophy, whether we believed in fate or just patterns of coincidence. But now our words were trimmed to logistics. Can you pick up dog food? Don't forget your dentist is next Tuesday. There's mail for you on the counter. I'd try to ask her how her day went, and she'd say, exhausting, and walk away. I'd tell her about something funny a coworker said, and she'd nod while scrolling. I stopped reaching eventually, because it started to feel like I was always interrupting something more important. Even her laugh changed. With me, it was gone, replaced by faint smiles or polite chuckles. But with others, with people I barely knew anymore, coworkers with names I'd only heard in passing, she lit up like a theater marquee. I remember one night specifically. We were at a friend's birthday dinner. I was seated across from Emily, and one of her new friends, a girl named Marissa, had brought her boyfriend, Derek, who happened to work in Emily's building. The two of them ended up side by side at the table, and I watched as they traded inside jokes and laughed about something from last week's pitch. I had no context. I didn't belong, but she did. She fit there in that world. Not with me. When we got home, I asked her if she wanted to plan a weekend getaway. Just the two of us. Nothing fancy. A drive up north. A cabin. Maybe some wine and board games. Just time. She looked up from her phone and smiled. A soft, distant smile. Maybe, she said. Not the kind of maybe that meant she was considering it. The kind that meant not a chance. But she didn't want to have the fight. And that was it. No, let's figure it out. Just that placeholder word. That dead-end word. I laid in bed that night staring at the ceiling, listening to her breathe beside me. I reached for her hand under the sheets, gently, cautiously, just to feel her skin, just to remind myself that she was still mine. She pulled it away in her sleep. Or maybe she was awake. I'll never know. There's a kind of loneliness that creeps in when you're lying inches from the person you love, and you feel more alone than if you were sleeping in an empty bed. That was when the fear stopped being fear and started becoming certainty. But I wasn't ready to confront it. Not yet. I started paying more attention instead. Quietly, I tracked her schedule. I noted the nights she came home late. I memorized the names she dropped. Jared, Marissa, Paul, Natalie. I Googled her company's events, compared them to her calendar. Sometimes things didn't line up. Sometimes they did, but barely. I started checking her phone when I could. Not her messages. I wasn't there yet. Just her battery usage. What apps were open? When she last opened Instagram. If she'd been on Maps during a time she claimed to be somewhere else. Little things. I hated myself for it. I hated that I had become that guy. The one creeping around, connecting dots that may or may not have meaning. But what choice did I have? She made me feel like I was crazy, so I needed proof that I wasn't. And part of me hoped I wouldn't find anything, because if I was wrong, maybe we could still fix it. But if I was right, then everything I feared was already happening. And I was just the last one to know. It happened on a Tuesday. Nothing special about the day. Just one of those sluggish, middle-of-the-week evenings where the hours blur together and everything feels mildly out of place. Emily was working late again. Quarter-end reviews, she said. We've got consultants flying in. I might crash at Marissa's if it runs too late. She said it like it was normal, like this was just what marriages turned into. Schedules and favors and heads-up texts at 6:41 p.m. I didn't argue. I barely even responded. She left the house in a rush. A quick kiss on the cheek, a purse swing over the shoulder, her phone already in her hand as she headed for the door. I watched her from the kitchen, one hand wrapped around a mug of coffee that had gone cold hours ago. After she left, I wandered the house aimlessly. I didn't turn on the TV, didn't scroll through my phone. I just walked, from the living room to the bedroom, from the bedroom to her office, then the kitchen, then back. I opened drawers I hadn't opened in months. Junk drawers, mostly. Chargers, dead pens, paper clips, expired coupons. That's when I saw the iPad. It was plugged into the wall, charging silently on the kitchen counter. We'd bought it a couple years back during a Black Friday sale, mostly for travel or to read on planes. It had become kind of a shared device, one of the last things that still felt mutual. I don't know what made me pick it up. Maybe curiosity, maybe instinct, or maybe it was just one more quiet scream in a series of whispers I'd been ignoring. It was unlocked. Surprising, honestly. I don't know if she forgot, or if she just didn't think I'd check. The home screen was cluttered with half-used apps. Spotify, Kindle, Safari, Photos. I tapped on the last one. First, everything looked normal. Old vacation sh*ts. A blurry sunset from a trip to Florida. Our dog, Murphy, with peanut butter on his nose. Emily at a winery with friends, laughing in the sun. Memories that felt like someone else's life. Then I scrolled up. The newest photos had been taken just a few days ago. A series of 4 or 5. At first glance, they looked like test sh*ts. A wine glass, the corner of our couch. A pair of candles lit on the coffee table. But the angle was strange. Off-center. Like someone trying to capture a moment discreetly. Then I saw the mirror. It was in the background of one of the sh*ts, the tall standing mirror in the corner of our living room. A decorative piece, more aesthetic than functional. And in the mirror, barely framed, was Emily. She was wearing a silk robe, dark blue, tied loosely around her waist. Something I'd never seen before. Her hair was down, damp at the ends. She was smiling, not at the camera but at someone else. Someone beside her. Someone holding her. An arm, just an arm, was wrapped around her waist. A man's arm. Tan. Muscular. Wearing a black smartwatch. No face. No defining features. Just enough. Just enough to know. I sat there staring at the photo, my heart pounding, my breath caught somewhere between my lungs and my throat. I wanted it to be a trick of the light, a reflection, a ghost limb, anything but what it so clearly was. But denial doesn't work when the evidence is pixelated, time-stamped, and sitting in your hand. I checked the date. 3 nights ago. The same night she said she was working late. The same night she came home smelling like aftershave I couldn't name. She had taken the photo herself. Maybe accidentally, maybe to send, maybe to save. But she hadn't deleted it. That's what stuck with me. She didn't delete it. I should have felt rage. Or grief. Or betrayal so sharp it made me punch a wall or break a glass. But I didn't. I felt quiet. Still. Like I was sitting in the eye of a storm I'd already lived through. I set the iPad down. Didn't throw it. Didn't scream. Didn't call her. Didn't cry. Because I realized something in that moment. The photo didn't demand a confrontation. It demanded a decision. And I had one to make. So I did what I'd been too afraid to do before. I let go of the story I'd been trying to tell myself. The one where she was just stressed, just distant, just figuring herself out. The one where I was reading too much into things. The one where this was salvageable. Because this wasn't salvageable. This was something else entirely. That night I didn't sleep. I lay in bed with the lights off, watching the shadows crawl along the ceiling, replaying every moment I could remember where I dismissed my own instincts. The nights she turned away from me. The dinners that never made sense. The way she stopped asking how my day was and stopped telling me about hers. The way I had stopped feeling like a husband and started feeling like an inconvenience. I remembered how she used to light up when I walked in the door. How she used to lean into my touch. How she used to reach for my hand in parking lots, instinctively, like it was the most natural thing in the world. That woman was gone. And the one sleeping with another man on our couch? She wasn't mine to chase. So I began pulling away. Not in anger. Not in desperation. But in quiet preparation. The next morning, I woke up before she did. She was in the shower when I made coffee. I sat at the table, looking at her empty mug across from mine. She came into the kitchen wrapped in a towel, kissed me on the head like nothing had happened. "Morning," she said. I nodded. "Morning." She poured herself a cup, scrolled her phone, laughed at something on the screen. Probably a meme, probably from him. I didn't ask. I didn't react, because I was already gone. Emotionally, mentally, I was out the door. Not physically yet, not legally, but those things would come. She had taken that step first, the step out of our life and into another. The only thing left was for me to follow, not after her, but away. And if she noticed something different about me over the next few days, the silence, the coldness, the way I didn't reach for her anymore, she didn't say anything. Maybe she thought it was stress. Maybe she thought I was pulling away, the way she accused me of sometimes. Maybe she liked it better that way, with the silence covering the guilt like a blanket. But I knew better. I knew what that photo meant. It meant the end had already happened. It just hadn't been acknowledged yet. And when endings go unspoken long enough, they rot into routines. And routines? Those are easier to walk away from. The morning after I saw the photo, I stood in front of the mirror and didn't recognize myself. Not in the dramatic, cinematic way. Not like I stared at my reflection and saw a stranger. It was subtler than that. Quieter. Like noticing a wall in your home has been cracking for years and you just now see how deep the damage goes. My eyes looked tired. Not from lack of sleep, but from months, maybe years, of carrying a weight I kept pretending wasn't mine. I didn't say anything to her that day. Or the day after. What was there to say? What could she say back? Sorry? It was a little late for that. So instead of confrontation, I chose calculation. I started becoming invisible. Not in the literal sense, but emotionally, psychologically. I stopped filling space and started slipping through it. And the truth? She didn't notice. Or maybe she noticed and didn't care. Either way, I started preparing. I moved slowly, quietly. While she scrolled through her phone at night, I copied files from our shared laptop. Bank statements, passwords, retirement accounts, mortgage documents. I backed up everything to a secure folder she didn't know about. I called it archive, like it was some dusty drawer of history no one ever checked. I created a new email account. One she wouldn't find if she went snooping, not that she seemed interested in me enough to try. I scheduled meetings with attorneys during my lunch breaks, told her I had back-to-back calls at work. She barely looked up when I said it. I opened a new checking account in my name only. Moved small amounts. Nothing she'd question. Nothing that would trigger alerts. 100 here. 200 there. Over weeks, it added up. At night, she lay next to me scrolling endlessly. TikToks, Instagram stories, Slack messages. I watched her reflection in the dark, the blue light flickering across her face like some digital halo. She still kissed me goodnight out of habit, lips barely touching my cheek. I stopped saying, "I love you." She didn't notice. That was when it really sank in, how long she'd been practicing this illusion. The illusion of marriage. The illusion of still choosing me, even though her heart had packed its bags a long time ago. It's a strange kind of heartbreak, realizing the person lying next to you in bed is already somewhere else. Not geographically, but spiritually, emotionally. Her body was here, but her life was lived in messages I didn't see and conversations I wasn't part of. I stopped asking who she was texting. I stopped wondering where she really was. I just let her drift, and she did. She floated through our house like a guest, still making coffee in the morning, still commenting on the weather, still reminding me to take the trash out. But everything in between was gone. The small stuff, the glue, it had all dissolved. And in that vacuum, I started living for myself again. Not loudly, not defiantly, but purposefully. I reconnected with an old friend from college, someone I hadn't seen in years. We met for lunch, caught up like no time had passed. I didn't tell him everything, just enough. He nodded like he'd been there. Maybe he had. "You look lighter," he said. "Like something's lifted." "Not lifted," I replied. "Just finally acknowledged." That night, I got home later than usual. Emily was already on the couch, a glass of red wine in her hand. Netflix paused on some show I didn't recognize. She looked up as I walked in. "Everything okay?" she asked casual. "Yeah," I said. "Just a long day." She didn't press, just nodded and turned back to the screen. I could see the moment she stopped thinking about me. Took less than 3 seconds. That's when I realized. She wasn't waiting for me to come back to her. She was waiting for the moment she could leave without guilt. The only reason she hadn't walked yet was because I hadn't given her a reason to. She wanted to be the one who got left, not the one who did the leaving. That way she could say it wasn't her fault. So I gave her what she wanted. I faded, day by day, piece by piece. When she made plans without me, I didn't ask questions. When she came home late, I didn't check the clock. When she canceled date nights, I just nodded. She noticed I was quieter, but not concerned. She thought I was in a funk. That's what she told her sister during a FaceTime call I overheard from the hallway. "He's just been distant lately," she said. "I think work's getting to him. Not we're struggling. Not I'm cheating on him with someone from my office. Just he's off." That's the narrative she chose. That I was the one retreating. That I was the one changing. That I was the problem. And I let her build that version of events. Because sometimes silence is more powerful than denial. Sometimes letting someone rewrite the story gives you the time to write your own ending. So I kept detaching. I started renting a small place across town. 1 bedroom, modest, clean. I told the landlord I needed it furnished and short-term. He didn't ask questions. I paid 3 months in advance. I started moving things over, first digital, then physical. Old clothes, sentimental keepsakes, my dad's watch, a copy of our wedding photo that used to sit on my nightstand, now shoved in a drawer. She didn't notice the frame was gone. Or maybe she did, and chose not to ask. We still shared meals occasionally. Still went to the grocery store together. Still played our roles. But it felt like theater now. Like we were performing marriage for an invisible audience. Neither of us willing to call cut. Then came the night I knew we were finished. Really, fully finished. She came home late again. Past midnight. I was on the couch, pretending to watch something. She walked in quietly, heels in hand, her voice syrupy. "Hey," she said, like we were roommates. "Didn't expect you to still be up." I looked at her for a long second. "How was the meeting?" She hesitated. "Long. Dinner too?" "Yeah." She nodded. "Both." I didn't push, just nodded back. She kissed my forehead and went upstairs. I stayed on the couch. And for the first time, I didn't feel hurt. I didn't feel anger or jealousy or fear. I felt done. Utterly, completely done. There was no fire left to burn. No fight left to pick. Just ashes. And you can't rebuild from ashes. You have to start somewhere new. That week, I made the final move. I redirected mail. Updated my driver's license. Called the bank to remove her as an emergency contact. I emptied the safe. Left the key. I stopped looking at her social media. Stopped caring where she went or who she was with. That part of me, the part that once begged for answers, had finally died. Because when someone already lives somewhere else in their mind, arguing becomes a form of begging. And I was done begging. I had already said goodbye. Not out loud. But in every quiet moment she mistook for disinterest. In every look I didn't give. In every question I stopped asking. In every "I love you" I didn't say back. I became invisible. On purpose. And in doing so I found myself again. Not the version of me who tried to make it work. Not the husband who clung to memories like lifeboats. But the man who finally understood that leaving isn't always about walking away. Sometimes it's about no longer standing still. First, I thought she wouldn't notice. The silence. The withdrawal. The subtle detachment. She'd been so wrapped up in her own world that I figured I could slowly disappear and she wouldn't even blink. But it turns out, when the person you've emotionally abandoned finally stops chasing you, you start to feel it. She noticed, but not in the way I hoped. Not in a "what's going on" kind of way. Not in a "can we talk?" or "have I done something wrong" kind of way. No. She noticed in the way people do when their reflection suddenly changes, and instead of asking what happened, they blame the mirror. It started with little digs. You've been quiet lately. Are you mad about something? You're being weird. All said with that dismissive tone, like I was a moody teenager acting out, not a man unraveling the threads of his own life. I gave her nothing to work with. No arguments. No accusations. I didn't bring up the iPad. I didn't say a word about the arm around her waist or the robe or the mirror or the silence between us that had grown too wide to cross. Because by now I wasn't looking for a fight. I was watching a performance, and she was rehearsing her lines. Soon, the digs turned to concern, but only the kind that made her look like the worried partner. Concern with a touch of condemnation. You've really changed lately, you know that? I feel like I don't even know you anymore. I try, Mark, but you make it so hard. Each time I'd nod slightly, shrug, offer a tired, yeah, let her say her piece. Because what do you say to someone who spent months pulling away, only to accuse you of disappearing when you finally stop reaching? It was a test, and I knew it. She was poking at the version of me she wanted back, the one who begged for closeness, who tried to prove himself, who fought for a connection she'd already buried. But that man was gone. The funeral had come and gone. She just missed it. Eventually, the narrative began to take shape, not within our walls but outside them. I started noticing shifts in the way people talked to me. Her sister texted me out of nowhere. Hey, everything okay with you too? A mutual friend, someone we'd known for years, gave me a hug a little too long at a birthday dinner. You're just going through a rough patch, she whispered. It'll pass. Pass? It already had. I scrolled through Emily's Facebook one night, not out of curiosity, but because I needed to see it for myself. How fast the story had changed. There it was, a photo of her at brunch with 3 of her friends, Jared included, sunglasses, mimosas, laughter staged under perfect lighting. The caption read, "Learning to find joy again. Sometimes people change, and that's okay." The comments poured in. You deserve happiness. Growth looks good on you. So proud of you for putting yourself first. And I realized, she was laying the groundwork. She was rewriting the script. I was no longer the man she was drifting from. I was the man who abandoned her. Emotionally unavailable, cold, detached, unreachable. She wasn't unfaithful. She was unfulfilled. She wasn't dishonest. She was misunderstood. She wasn't cheating, she was healing. And I wasn't heartbroken. I was toxic. That was the new story. And God help me, it worked. People believed it. Because people always want a story that fits in a single sentence. One villain, one victim, one clean narrative they can post a reaction to. And if you don't speak up, your silence becomes guilt. But I didn't say anything. Not because I didn't have the receipts, I did. Not because I couldn't have blown it all up. I could have. But because I'd learned something along the way. There's no point trying to convince people of a truth they've already decided not to believe. Let her have the sympathy. Let her collect it like coins in a jar, rattling with each conversation. Let her be the one they text, "You're so strong." As she wipes tears she practiced in the mirror. I didn't want vindication anymore. I wanted peace. Still, the shift in her tone became more obvious at home. More passive-aggressive. More pointed. You've just been so distant. I feel like I'm doing this alone. I wish I knew what changed. Sometimes I'd stare at her while she said these things. Not to int asterisk mid-8. Not to argue. Just to see if there was even a flicker of recognition behind her eyes. Any sign that she knew exactly what she was doing. Nothing. She delivered every line with the poise of someone who had rehearsed it 100 times in her head. Enough that she started to believe it herself. And when she told her version of events to others, I knew exactly how she phrased it. I don't know what happened. He just pulled away. It's like he stopped caring. I tried everything. But you can't force someone to love you. I became the man who let her go. Not the man she walked away from. And maybe that was the final cruelty of it. Not just the betrayal, not just the infidelity, but the way she twisted the ending so that she got to walk out with clean hands. No accountability. No apology. Just a well-lit path of absolution paved with half-truths and selective memory. One night, I overheard her talking on the phone in the other room. She thought I was asleep. I wasn't. "I think he's depressed," she said quietly. "I don't know. He just shuts down. I've tried, but he won't let me in." There it was. The final nail. Now I wasn't just distant. I was broken. Something to be pitied. And Jared? He was just a supportive friend. Maybe more now. But only because I was emotionally abandoned. That's the line she would use, I guarantee it. Emotionally abandoned. Like she hadn't left the relationship a year ago and just forgotten to pack her body with her spirit. I wanted to yell, to confront, to walk into that room and say, "You don't get to rewrite this." But I didn't, because I knew how it would go. She'd cry, she'd spin it, she'd say I was unstable. And the more I fought for the truth, the crazier I'd look. So I stayed quiet. Let her think she was winning. Let her cast me as the villain. Because villains don't explain themselves. They just vanish from the story. And I was almost there. The thing no one tells you about being the bad guy in someone else's narrative is that sometimes it's the only way out. If she wanted a reason to feel justified, I'd give her one. Let her tell her friends I stopped loving her. Let her tell her coworkers I lost interest. Let her tell herself whatever helped her sleep at night. Because the truth? She let go a long time ago. I just stopped clinging to her fingers. She came home late again. Heels in hand, perfume trailing behind her like smoke. I was on the couch, lights low. She looked surprised. "You're up?" she asked. I nodded. "How was the work dinner?" I asked. She hesitated. "Fine. Just long." She smiled, kissed my forehead. And that was it. No guilt. No pause. No awareness of the silence screaming between us. As she walked upstairs, I realized I didn't feel anything. Not sadness. Not anger. Just nothing. My goodbye had already happened. Not in words, but in all the quiet moments where love used to live. I didn't need closure. I needed distance. So I spent the next few days moving in silence. Packing a little at a time. Securing the last loose ends. No confrontation. No announcement. Just the sound of drawers closing. A lease signed. A future quietly reclaiming itself. It ended the way it began, with laughter. Another rooftop party. Another string of lights and curated joy. She was near the bar again, Jared beside her. She laughed, loud, free, her hand brushing his arm. And I stood there, invisible. Except this time it was intentional. No note, no fight, no grand exit. I turned, walked away, and didn't look back. Let her keep laughing. Because when someone chooses someone else in front of you, they don't deserve a goodbye. Only your absence, and the silence that follows.